Okay, first up, basic shop items. Midterm grades are in. They look solid. Handful of incompletes, couple of kids who were just missing tests. Life happened, and that's it. Remember, if you were gone for whatever reason, it's okay that you missed something. Some of you have already seen I put in a blank. I just left it blank in the grade book on the grade check because throwing in a random 0 to say, haha, this is missing, screw you, is kind of a power trip, and teachers shouldn't do that. However, if it's been like 2-3 weeks and we haven't had a conversation, or you have ignored my attempts at a conversation, all right, then I'm going to put the missing in. Okay? So some of you got blanks in there, take care of them. Because now that the midterm is done, or the midterm is reported, or I think they get finalized for report cards that they don't print anymore tomorrow. After that, then I might have to go back in and put in a couple of missings, especially if they're for quiz 1 and 2. If they're for the chapter 0 packet, there's, I think, 2 or 3 of you where I got those missing. And in every one of those cases, it's a kid that I know did the thing. Okay, so just make sure if you have anything missing, please turn it in. I don't like putting zeros in. I really dislike putting missings in. Okay, especially in PreCalc. Midterm grades, just show you. Nope, not you. You. There we go. Okay. Spring semester last year. So be aware, especially when we got sophomores in PreCalc, that there's usually a lot of kids who are starting to see their first B ever and they lose their crap because they have unhealthy expectations of perfection. Thank you, Mom and Dad. If that's the case, y'all, you might, over the course of the semester, those 95s and 96s turn into 93s, 92s, and that's where you get a bunch of Bs, okay? Not everyone can be the captain of the team. A is supposed to mean something. Now, if you don't like what your grade is going into the final, remember, we got grade replacement. Your final is cumulative, covers everything. Get a higher grade on your final than your grade going into the final. That's your grade. Good job. Every year I get about maybe 10 to 20% of the class hits that option. Okay? It's very, very hard to get an A on the final, very, very hard to fail it. Okay? So, since we got a bunch of, don't want to say tryhards, but we got a bunch of tryhards in here, we got to make sure that y'all know it is okay to have a B. It is not the end of the world. It's even okay to have C's. Okay. So, but tests and quizzes are looking good. At the end of 3 quizzes, we do have exactly 1 kid with the hat trick, meaning 300s. Another kid was very close, 30, 30, 29, and I'm sure that they are very steamed about it. Y'all are doing good, okay? Keep going. So, what else? No idea what's happening in the next 2 days. Something's coming and they don't know how much. The models are all over the place because this is a high pressure system It's a high altitude system. Normally in the Black Hills, you can depend on where the location is as to precipitation accumulation. Like, I live outside of Bell. Whatever we got, take that to like 120% of that is spearfish. Spearfish always gets more because it's closer to the hills. Stuff gets shoved up. Y'all remember basic earth science, right? So you go further below that, get down to lead deadwood, they get about 150 to 170% of what we get, almost double, because right smack in the hills, everything gets shoved up, condenses, falls down. Everything is currently at high altitude right now. My wife is obsessed with weather, so she rambles all this stuff at me. Um, Current projections are spearfish is at 10 plus inches for tonight and tomorrow, tapering off Thursday. The likelihood that they shut it down for tomorrow is pretty good because there's already wet, slushy roads, and then it's going to freeze, and that means not good driving conditions. Let y'all know, for everyone who's like, yeah, snow day, that means that we surpass the 5 days built into our schedule, and now we have to make stuff up at the end of the year. Okay? Which means coming back after Memorial Day weekend, and because of our finals schedule, not unheard of, we've done it before, because of our final schedule, they might add 3 days at the end instead of one to just put our finals right after Memorial Day weekend. Okay? So just let you know, that's all stuff that kids ask about, and I've been told that teachers don't really tell kids this stuff. So, reminder, I think I said this on day one, if we ever have a snow day or anything like that, y'all, I never send work home. I never tell you to do work while you're at home. That's stupid. You are at home. You probably have responsibilities at home. How many of you got to look after a younger sibling? How many of you got to clear out the driveway? How many of you got to go check in on grandma and grandpa? Okay? If I'm at home, I'm on daddy duty or moving snow. I move snow for my neighborhood. So I cannot work at home. I don't expect you to. Okay? All right. Thursday. I was exhausted. We ran into a gap in our knowledge. I got frustrated. I should not have. That is not on you, that's on me. And I hope that you have teachers who can say that. It baffled me that we weren't experienced with that. We weren't fluent with that. And I got grumbly because usually I get kids come up to higher level maths that don't know how to do basic stuff, and then it makes my job more difficult. It's one of my pet peeves. Okay? We did not finish 1-7, so that means no daily check. That means we just jump back in. Before we do, I made sure that our assignment, those of you who are keeping up with them, made sure that our assignment had a couple of those rational functions. Were we okay with it, having seen that factoring a couple of times now? Okay. Were there any of them that were iffy? We got to know how to construct the inverse before we keep going with what's on the menu today. I don't know what last one is. Give me a number. 55. So you swap x and y, square both sides?
Yeah, the domain and range.
Well, okay. Just look at the radicand of the original. What can't x equal? Look at all the combinations of things that it can't equal. Denominator says can't be 2, so I put a hole at 2. But then, because I've got two variable expressions within a radical, The grand total of this thing can't be negative, right? So set the whole thing equal to 0, because that's the dividing line between positive and negative. Cross multiply, turns out this doesn't matter. -1 is the dividing line between what is allowed and what is not allowed. So I can't be 2, but I also have to be from -1 forward. You smack those two restrictions together, there's your domain of the original. Now, what happens when I put a -1 in there? Get 0 over -3 is square root of that is 0. So I'll have 0, comma, or sorry, -1, comma, 0 as the first point on this graph, and then it takes off to infinity from there. Someone was asking about the actual graph for this. X can equal -2 or can equal 2, right? What feature is that when it's on denominator? Asymptotes. But if you look at the graph for this, it doesn't really show you that it goes up to infinity because it's so close to the asymptote. Remember, the calculator screens are running off the same tech as Game Boy Color from 1997. Okay? If the calculator says I'm not allowed to show something at x equals 2, but the asymptote, it climbs along that asymptote at like 1.998. It doesn't have enough pixels to show that, so it just quits. So your graph might look more like that. Like it just kind of has a break in there. You have to know that it keeps going upwards. Okay? So the range does head off to infinity. And then you swap those for your domain range of this guy. But we should be able to see the domain of this doesn't include plus or minus 1. And we're going to review in chapter 2 our rational functions, see how the degrees are the same. It means it has a horizontal asymptote at y equals 2. So the range will exclude 2. The catch is that we also have to go from -1 forward because of my original. The domain and range on that one were goofy. That's why I assigned that one. I know that we're sketchy on domain and range. We need practice with it. Okay. We don't stress that nearly enough in Algebra 1. I try to bang that drum in Algebra 2, but we don't get enough experience with it. And depending who you had Algebra 2 with, maybe there wasn't even an emphasis on domain and range at all. I know the new curriculum doesn't like talking about it in terms of analysis the way the old one did. These are different gaps that we have. The last 3 years have been a giant crap show. And in the middle of that, we also switched curricula. Okay, that means we're going to have some gaps. That means we got to ask questions. Okay. I know we did that one. Did we do any of the others? Oh, we did do the composition proof? Did we do both of these guys? Are we okay with find inverse, do phi and phi off? Phi. You do the composition between the function and its inverse. You have to do that and that. If you do both of those, both of them should come out as what? Plain old x. So we did 3a and 3b? I wonder if the other class is just like a full example behind you then. Huh, okay. All right. Then, remind me again, how do I make inverse? Swap x and y. Well, if I do that algebraically, I can do that graphically as well. Even if I have no clue what this graph is, you know what? I take that back. We did transformations. I would like you to tell me the equation of this graph before we do anything else. Well, let's find out. What is that graph?
Is that it? Did I do it? No. Why not? It gets moved up one.
Because that's a line.
Oh.
You didn't
Right.
No, you can't have peanut butter jelly for dinner every night. It's got to be a little more complex than that. That's my boy. He eats real food at school, so when he gets home, he wants peanut butter jelly because they can't have peanut butter in his classroom. Yeah.
I don't like it. I think it's gross. I don't know who came up with that.
Okay, a couple of you said correctly so. Cubic. And cubic normally has 0, 0. So how about this? A times x minus h cubed plus k. What if I do it that way? So y is x. Did I go left or right? Oh, so cubed. But I did go up 1. Is there a stretch or compression to it? Because I saw a good chunk you missed that on your test. A lot of us missed the dilation. That parabola did have a dilation to it. Remember, it's what did it do over what it should have done. So if it goes over 1 and up 1, well, it went up 1, it should have gone up 1. So no stretch or compression. It is just y equals x cubed plus 1. It is that simple. Okay. Now, if I'm going to make my inverse, I'm going to take all these points, the point 0, 1, the point, see now we got to ballpark it, right? Like, it's not exactly 1, 2, but, oh wait, yeah, this cubic, sorry. This thing is blown up gigantic right in front of me. All right, 1, 2. This one I'm going to say is about 1.5, what's that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I'm going to ballpark these. That's about negative 1, 0. That's about what? Negative 1.8, negative 5. The reason I'm ballparking them is because it doesn't have to hit a nice integer intersection for me to flop the coordinates. If something is at about 1.55, I can go to 5 about 1.5. Flip them. If this is at about 1, 2, or in this case exactly 1, 2, then I can go to 2, 1. If this is at 0, 1, I can go to 1, 0. If this is at negative 1, 0, I can go to 0, negative 1. If this is at about negative 1.8, negative 5, I can go to negative 5 about 1.8. Connect the dots. And what you should see is a perfect reflection over what line? Remember geometry? What swapped x's and y's? Reflection over what? You just said yx a whole bunch of times. Say that again. Y equals x. Just the line y equals x. Okay, if I reflect over the line y equals x, okay, like in the ancient times, maybe you did like the Bart Simpson method with this, where it's down part of a box, 1, 2, 3, box segments away from the line, so I'll go 1, 2, 3 a little bit away. We call it the Bart Simpson method because it looks like his head. Actually, now that kind of looks like Groot because it's green. But, yeah, I am Groot. I've been up since 3:52. I'm tired, and now I'm seeing things like, look, it's a squid.
Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. That's so cute.
God, I'm tired. Okay. The short, no squid. The short version is you swap X's and Y's. That's it. Okay? If you got to ballpark it, then ballpark it. Swap X and Y. That's all you got to do. I would identify the coordinates first, then swappy swappy. Bonus if you can tell me the equation next to each of them, what the original is. How about what the equation is? No. No. We don't use that kind of language here.
I think I've done this wrong.
Okay. First one, if I got a point at 0, 3, I can have a point at 3, 0. If I have a point at 1, 5, then I can have a point at 5, 1. Negative 1, 1 becomes 1, negative 1. Negative 2, negative 1 becomes negative 1, negative 2. Negative 3 becomes negative 3, negative 3. Negative 4, negative 5 becomes negative 5, negative 4. Connect the dots. And again, you should see that butterfly symmetry of it over the line y equals x. And remember this one, because it's on the line of symmetry, again, that's like your face is smashed up against a mirror. Like the reflection is the exact same thing. -3 and -3 just trade places. Look, it's the same thing. I hope we can find the equation of a line at everyone who plans to take an ACT at some point. Okay, find your y-intercept, find your slope, count your boxes. Okay. Um, I I turned this into x 2y plus 3, subtracted 3, divided both by 2. I just I just wrote the inverse because -3/2 up 1 over 2. Yeah. I just wanted to see if you could. You didn't have to do the yellow stuff. Okay. I just wanted to see if you can because it's good practice. This one, we're not used to seeing square root of x drawn all the way out to, what's that, 80? We're not used to seeing that, but isn't the square root of 81 9? So I could go to 981. I could go to 25 5, means I'm at 525. Same thing. Okay. And if I was going to write my inverse for that, I would have to have my domain restriction on it because it's only half of the parabola. We're just not used to seeing it drawn out to that scale. So, inverse of a graph, pretty easy, swap x's and y's. I think we're okay with that. Because it was last week, I do want to see you do the composition proof one more time because it's been 118.5 hours since you did it. Well, 5 days, 5 by 24, minus an hour and a half. I would like you to do this one. Prove their inverses. Remember the composition. The composition says you do f of g, g of f. Both of them should come out as plain old x. F of g, g of f, fog and goff. Both should come out as plain old x if you do it right. And notice that they have the domain restriction there on the parabola. Because if I didn't, then this would not be inverses. Yeah, you'll know when I go through and check your note packets, like, I see all the crap you're writing to each other. I see all the little comic illustrations in the corner. Last semester, the one girl who was obsessed with nerd boys Like I Heart Nerd Boys, yeah. Or no, Emo Boys. Emo Boys, that's what it was. Oh yeah. Geekathon, we take over the library this Saturday. All day long, kids bring in PCs, consoles, we throw up projectors, multi-screen tournaments. We'll have like Magic Gathering drafts, we'll have commander pods, we order pizza. We do it once every quarter. It's fun.
What did I do wrong?
I don't know what you do wrong.
Didn't almost hit a cross this time.
Okay, FOG, roger that.
You didn't cross out the two.
Squared. You killed a mathematical puppy. What you do for one, you do for all.
I don't care.
So just divide by 2.
You were the one talking about like starving children and they're weak on Thursday.
No, that was
Yeah.
because I don't have children. Because then I'd have to take care
You're in
of
the
them.
wrong state.
I didn't realize.
Divide that by 2, divide that by 2, divide that by 2. You have to do all 3 of them. Because they're both over 2.
So that becomes, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so f of a thing is thing squared over 2 minus 6. G of x is square root of 2x plus 12. Getting 2x plus 12 over 2 minus 6. Getting x plus 6 minus 6. Getting x. G of a thing is square root of 2 by a thing plus 12. Thing is
Oh, I forgot 6.
okay. How we do?
Good. When we finally remember that counting cookie was wrong. Some of us did.
I wrote the restriction on there because in fog I end up with just plain old x. And since f already had a restriction of x can't be less than 0, I was good to just say x. But because g of f, goff, doesn't have that restriction on g, at the end I just wanted to clarify that x did have to be greater than or equal to 0 because I took it out of radical town. Remember, if we take something out of radical town, we might be tempted to put plus or minus there if we didn't put the radical there. The radical was already in play, so I know it should be the positive or principal root, but I'm just putting that there as a clarification. It's not necessary, but sometimes it's helpful when someone makes that clarification. All right. Then Satan said, let there be words with math. Okay. It's not hard. Okay. It is not hard. So, show you how old this book is, or these notes are. $8 an hour. Y'all, I made that working at a state park in 1998. Okay. Some of you might have been making that at McDonald's 2 years ago. Progress. Earns $8 an hour, works at least 40 hours per week. Overtime at 1.5. That is federal standard, by the way. Federal standard is overtime is a minimum 1.5, time and a half. Her total earnings is this function. I want you to explain that function to me. Why do I have a constant of 320 plus stuff? Like, what's the input? Read the problem. What is the input? My x and y mean what in this problem? Read. X is the hours she works. F of x is what? Okay, her earnings. So look at that equation and tell me, why is there a constant of $320? 8 by 40 is 320. Why is that a constant? Read the problem. Okay, this is just her time and a half. 1.5 times 8 is 12. Why is there a 320 there no matter what? At least 40 hours a week. So you know she's making that much. Then we say x minus 40 because I'm not getting overtime for anything under 40. So if she works 0 overtime, 0 minus 40, negative 40, or sorry, 0 hours total. If she works 0 hours total, 0 minus 40 is negative 40, negative 40 by 12, you owe them money? That's stupid. That's why the graph starts here. That's why we have 320 as a constant, is because they're telling you x is going to be 40 or greater. Okay? Why does the inverse of this function exist? Think back to the beginning of inverses. How do we know an inverse exists? What was the first thing we checked? Horizontal line test. That's it. Explain why the inverse exists. Okay, it passes the horizontal line test. That's it. Like, that's the reason why. If it passes the horizontal line test, I know there's an inverse function that exists. Here's the big part of this and why I'm even willing to do the word problem versions of these. If this is my original, this is the original function, input is hours, output is earnings. What happens when I swap domain and range, when I swap x and y? Now, my inverse function of x is going to be hours worked, and x itself is going to be my earnings. That's the big part of this. When you find the inverse in a word problem context, you also have to swap the labels of what they mean. Now I'm going to put in the earnings and I'm going to get out how much she worked. Anyone ever do that? Like, you just had one hell of a month and everything is just messed up and time is fluid. I don't know what day of the week it is anymore. You get your paycheck, you're like, huh, that's higher than I thought it was. How much did I work this month? If you have one of those moments, the inverse of this says I can plug in her paycheck and it'll tell me how much she worked. Okay. What restrictions, if any, should be placed on the domains of these things? All right. Domain for f of x. The original problem, or the original function, what was x? What was my input? Hours worked. What is a reasonable domain for that? Okay, the least she's going to work is 40. So 40 to what? Because that arrow goes off to infinity. But I'm betting you can't work infinity hours in a week, even though some days it'll feel like it. So you can do 24 by 7, assuming that she is going to work nonstop, 24 hours a day, 7 days in the week, no breaks. breaking every labor law in existence, not sleeping, going crazy, having delusions, or, okay, what if the business is only open so certain hours? Like when I was in college, I worked night shift at places. When I ran the group home, there was times that I would have to do the night shift. Someone would call in sick. I would have to do the morning shift. So I'm awake for like 30 hours straight. Now I'm going to go to my class. Then I'm going to go pass out. And 3 hours later, I'm going to go back to work. That's why I use 24-hour format in my time, by the way, as I got used to it. I probably can't be 168 hours. Or was it 168, right? Probably can't be 168. And this is where the context of the problem matters. If you had said 168, I would take it. Like, she's going to break labor laws. Y'all know, like, there's different laws depending on ages for minors, like when you can work, how much you can work during the school days or not school days. What is it? Under 16, you can't work past 9 or 10. Okay, but if you're 16 to 18, they can go to, was it something like 11 on school days or something like there are laws about this stuff. And even as an adult, in an 8-hour shift, they are required to give you a half-hour meal break. Every 4 hours, you are required by law to have a 10 or 15-minute break. Like these are OSHA standard. Yeah? Now, some businesses will find loopholes depending on state laws where they'll give you an hour lunch and no breaks. That happens. You know that you can only work so many hours straight through before you have to have I believe it's a 7-hour break for sleep. Okay, all of these things exist, so that's when I say, and I want you to put next to this, context. When they ask for a reasonable domain and range, some of us might have different answers. Okay, Holly's a masochist. She wants to work 168 hours in a week. She's going to put 168 because that is the maximum amount that we can work. Whereas, I don't know, maybe Owen decides, no, I'm going to look up the labor laws for South Dakota and I'm going to find a, and he gets the exact amount in there. Okay. So it depends on what you're willing to do for the context of the problem. All right, flip the script on it now. What about for the inverse? What is my input on the inverse? Domain for inverse is the range of the original. So the domain of the inverse, remember these swapped, is earnings. What's the bottom of the barrel? What's the least amount she's making that week? 320, because it says she's earning at least 40 hours a week, $8 an hour. What's the most she could earn? It depends whether we're following labor laws or whether Holly's our boss. So maybe we go put 168 hours into the original and find out how much money she made. I'd be curious if someone could look it up. I thought that it's 1.5 past 40, but some states, I think if you go past 60, it has to go up to 2 times, or on holidays. So,
I have a question.
yeah.
So why is it 320 if the graph only shows 300?
They screwed up. There. That's a good question. See how the graph looks like it starts right at 300? Okay. That's a good question. 320 to what? 168 hours in there. How much is she making? And again, next to that, I want you to say context. Like, I know that there's been problems in the past where it was like ticket sales at a concert venue, something like that. What would be the maximum domain and range? Well, how many people can fit in the stadium, right? How many can, maybe one person says the capacity of the stadium, but someone else says twice that because people are going to lie in mosh pit. Maybe someone else says, depends what the fire marshal says. Like, it depends, okay? Like, technically, the capacity of this classroom, like by physical space, I think is 56, like by fire marshal standards. Oh, that I've seen it. Like when we have the game club like lunch meetings and just anyone can come. Usually the beginning of the semesters. Yeah, there's 50 plus people in here. It's loud and smelly. Um, okay, find the number of hours worked last week if her earnings were 380. Instead of me plugging 380 here and working my way backwards, maybe we take care of the rest of part A, find the inverse. Because if I want to know the hours worked when I have these earnings, I should be able to put in earnings. If I want to put in earnings, then I need the inverse. So we have f of x is 320 plus 12 by x minus 40, or y is 12x, this is negative 480, so minus 160. If I simplify, distribute, combine like terms. So go swap your x and y, find that inverse function. Now, question is, do you want to leave it like this, or do you want to separate them both over 12? Okay. If someone has a strong opinion, we will go with that. Okay, that inverse function is going to be 1/12 x plus 160 over 12, simplify. Okay. And now it says, again, I could take that, or if you had left it as inverse function of x is x plus 160 over 12. Same difference, take both, either one. And it says now her earnings were 380, dump it in. How much did she work? Or how many hours did she work? You plug it in for x in the inverse, because in the inverse now input is earnings. Plug it in, plug it in. I got 45.
Yeah, me too.
So you do 1/12 times 380.
I didn't want to have, that's why.
Okay, there you go. 1/12 times 380 plus 40 over 3. Or It asks when her earnings are 380. How many hours did she work? Now, how many of us looked at it and said, well, 380 minus 320? She got 60 extra bucks. 60 divided by 12 is 5 extra hours. Okay. That's something that I really struggle with my low algebra is I got a lot of kids who got really good number sense like that. They just can't algebra to save their life. Where plugging this in and doing the order of operations would be difficult for them. But they'd look at that and say, okay, 380 minus 320 is 60. 60 divided by 12, like 5, so $45. No, 45 hours. Because words are hard. Like they just bam, bam, bam through that, but they couldn't do the algebra part of it. For those of you who are headed off towards the standardized testing environment, boy, oh boy, does being able to do basic numeracy like that save you time on ACT. Flip it over. I want you to run it start to finish. Does the function exist? Or sorry, inverse function exist? What are the meanings? What restrictions? Oh yeah, this problem. Well, I like the name Salata because to me, I see Zoe Saldana, an actress who's like in a bunch of sci-fi movies, and she's gorgeous. She's Gamora from Guardians of the Galaxy. Uh-huh.
I watched that on the airplane.
She's also Lieutenant Uhura in the Star Trek reboots. Like she's in a bunch of movies. Pretty lady.
What did you say?
Yes. Yes, you do math now.
So when it says explain why the inverse, why does it have to be the answer pretty much always it passes the first line?
Yes, ma'am.
But you have to make sure it passes the horizontal line test first, right?
Yeah, but then they wouldn't give us 15 more questions.
Turn your phones off before class. Yeah. Look at the original. Will the original function pass the horizontal line test? Again, sometimes you can look at the function itself and you just tell, oh, hey, it's a line, so it's going to pass. I've been up since 3:52. If I can caffeinate my way into doing math, so can you. Does anyone just that reminds me, and I know this runs the risk of getting us off task again. Does anyone in here have like the early morning practices? Because I remember like Kate being a puddle first semester. Yeah.
You didn't sleep on your desk over half the time.
Like there was drool stains on some of the packets that got turned in. Kind of puddle on the desk. Does anyone have just like weird activity schedules or something like that? Let me know. Y'all, I think it's really stupid that you would go do activities and then have to go home and start homework at like 9, 10, 11 at night. I disagree with that premise entirely. Just come have a conversation with me, okay? Like, we'll work something out. Like early morning practices. Who was it? The marching band always gets wrecked in the fall.
Otherwise that wouldn't be a function because it wouldn't pass the course. It's horizontal. No, there should be a slope. Oh, I need to check my down. Yeah, it was 0.1. So I'm all wrapped. I see you. Oh, fine. Really, I'm not. Oh yeah, you're right. It's that like. Oh. Oh, you just said that.
And just distributed. Got it written with and without the decimal. Because when you divide by 0.13, 0.13 is 13 hundredths. Dividing by fractions, easy as pie. Flip second multiply.
The reason I use zero negative 120 is because the y-intercept is negative 120. I know.
Okay. I'm confident in our ability to do make an inverse. Again, I wrote it with or without the decimal. I would take either one of these. Okay, they're the same thing. Part B. This is the one that really, really matters in terms of the word problem context. The original, what is X, the input? Dollars what? Dollars something costs, dollars I'm making, dollars I'm paying. Gross pay of X dollars. Y'all get a paycheck, right? And you know that the number you see at the top isn't what's actually going into your bank account. The number at the top is your gross pay, and then you have all the deductions, and then you get your net pay. That's how much actually comes home. Okay? So make sure you know the difference here. Gross pay is like if you are making $12 an hour, $12 an hour is your gross wage. But that's not how much you're actually taking home, right? You get a little bit taken out for Medicare, a little bit taken out for FICA, a little bit taken out for maybe insurance, a little bit taken out for state taxes, a little bit taken out for federal taxes. All of that comes out of your check. Now, as minors who are probably making less than the standard deduction, what is it up to now? Anyone know? Anyone actually do your own taxes? Or at least participate in your parents doing them? Okay. The most teens are not going to make over what is called the standard deduction amount in terms of how much do you make in a year. So if you don't make over that amount, then you paid in more than you should have because the standard deduction says, nah, you don't pay this much in taxes. That's why most of you, if you have a job that is legal and above board that actually has taxes, someone's not just paying you cash. Hey, I worked as a farmhand. You know how many checks I cashed that said parts expense in the memo? Oh yeah. Most of you are going to do your taxes and you're going to claim zero. You claim tax exempt because you didn't make enough. So you get all of that back. So then by the end of the year, you'll get all of that stuff back, and now you'll actually have your gross payback. Once you become an adult, that doesn't happen. Hey, if you don't want to lose money on taxes, pretty simple. Just be the single income for a family, especially as a teacher, and then you're dirt poor broke, and the government says, "No, dude, you need this more than we do," and they give it back. So, f of x was savings, wasn't it? Okay. I had a girl end up in my quote book for that before, like, I've thought about being a teacher. It depends on how rich my husband is.
No, real. That is literally,
That, yes, it is. If the original was gross pay and savings, then your inverse function is what? Now what's my input? Savings. So I put this much in savings. My output will be how much was my gross pay. All right, C, what restriction should be placed on the domains? So, the original, X is gross pay. Anywhere up there, does it say what the minimum amount is that she's getting paid or the minimum amount she's working, anything like that? So what is the bottom? What is the least amount she could get paid? 0. So for f of x, domain from 0 to, does it tell me how much she's earning? It just tells you what she's budgeting. Like A, boy, is this an old book. B, I mean, could she be earning like $20,000 a month and just living like a cheapskate? Yeah. So I don't know how much she's actually earning. I don't know if I would say infinity because A, infinity is not a location. I can't make infinite dollars. Not even Bezos does that. Pretty close. This is one of those cases where I would say up to her salary. From 0 up to her salary or 0 up to max earnings, or remember when I said it's going to be the context of the problem. We don't know how much she makes. So you might have to put non-math terms to answer a math question. I don't know how much she makes. So it's going to be from 0 to whatever her salary is.
Wouldn't it have a parenthesis on it, or because we don't technically? No, because it would equal.
Well, it would be an amount, I just don't know what it is. Think of it like up to x and x is a variable. I can still put a bracket on that number. You're thinking like infinity because infinity isn't a location. This is a location, I just don't know where it is. kind of like if I asked half of you, where's your locker? It is a location. It's just you might not know where it is. Okay? Or is it your class is now all freshmen are guaranteed, was it? All freshmen and seniors are guaranteed locker? No, seniors had to sign up for one if they wanted one. Okay. Like we literally don't have enough lockers for the number of kids we have in the school now. So if that's what the domain is for the original, when I swap it, what is the least amount she could save? Careful. If she made $0, plug $0 in here. So if she makes $0, she's in debt. She would have to pull money out of savings. Okay, so 65% of her gross pay is her net pay. She budgets $600 a month for that. Estimates 20% of her remaining monies for her savings, blah, 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 blah. So now her savings, she would actually have to take money out. So if she made $0 because she worked nothing at all, now is it going to be negative 120 or is it going to be negative 600? Like, how much is she going to have to pull out of savings if she does not earn anything? Okay. This is where the percentages actually mess with the context of the problem. She does have to, that 0.2, they're using that to say 20% of the remaining money. Well, what if there was no remaining money? That doesn't mean that we cut your expenses down. It is from negative 600. Okay. She would have to take money out of savings. Any of you in personal finance? I was just wondering if they talk about in there, like nationwide, you hear about the economy is actually doing decent. Like Americans are spending plenty of money right now. If you listen to any of the news reports, economists are saying, yeah, people are spending lots of money. Woo! That's because, inflation, price gouging, all that kind of stuff. Actually, it turns out that's going to hit a giant crash because people are taking it out of their savings like this. People who are below the median level of income are racking up credit card debt and taking money out of savings right now. Okay. So this is entirely feasible that she has to take money out of savings to pay her expenses. Up to, what is the most that she could save? Depends if we're getting philosophical. This is in a month. Technically, if I threw her entire salary in there, it would be 13% of her salary minus 120. And I don't know what that money is. I don't know what that amount is. So I will put that entire expression as 0.13 salary minus 120. This is the difference between Algebra 2 versus headed up the ladder, is now you have to consider that there are going to be contextual clues to the problems. Sometimes they don't have a nice, neat, wrapped up answer. Okay. The big thing is that you can swap the labels. and you can think about thing. Everyone got their 2-packet? Okay. Okay, the whole lot of you are sophomore through senior, so you have all been through, at the very least, biology, where you talk about binomial nomenclature. What is binomial nomenclature?
Like the naming of a species.
With
The genus and the specific epithet.
specifically binomial nomenclature means I'm going to use 2 names, right? Do you remember that suffix nomial means terms? So if part 1 of chapter 2 is talking about monomials, monomial, one term, it's going to be of the form ax to the n. Okay? These are all monomials, and look at all that analysis stuff on there. Oh yeah, it's a new one. Look at all the analysis stuff on there. You should be able to now look at a graph. You don't have to prove it anymore. Don't have to do the symmetry test anymore. Don't have to do the limit test for continuity, all that. But you still have to be able to tell me this stuff. You can look at a function and tell me what's its domain, what's its range, its x and y intercepts, its continuity. If there is any discontinuity, you have to be the one to identify where that happens. Some of us missed that there was asymptote or a hole on our test. There should have been 2 things that you tested for continuity. What else? Symmetry, extrema, and our end behavior we are always going to write as limits. Intervals of increase, decrease, constant, all that kind of business. Notice this should look an awful lot like the leading term test. Do y'all remember leading term test? Yay or nay? The idea is if n is even, n is odd, if a is positive, if a is negative, remember that? When, and then you put in the corner here, f of x is ax to the n. Okay, if I got a monomial and it meets these conditions of positive or negative leading coefficient, odd or even power, it's just going to have all of this as a descriptor. Now, it's a monomial. That means it's not translated left, right, up, and down. It's not being stretched. Well, it could be stretched and reflected, but it's not translated any direction. That's what messes with them. So what's the difference from like x squared to x to the 4th to x to the 6th? Those are all positive n is evens. What happens to the graph as that power gets bigger? Dump it in your calculator. y1, x squared, y2, x to the 4th, y3, x to the 6th. Yeah, they're all going to have this same information, but what happens to the graph as the power gets larger?
Yeah, the bottom it goes like this.
Okay, more and more get a little junk in the trunk, right?
Yeah.
The base gets a little wider. Okay, because it's going to take off faster. It's the difference between parabola look like this, chordic looks more like a U, x to the 6th almost looks like a bucket. Okay, it just keeps getting wider and wider at the base because it's going to take off faster. Same thing goes for odd functions. What's the difference from x cubed to x to the 5th to x to the 7th? If we don't know, plug those into y1, 2, and 3 and look at the graphs. What changes? What changes as an odd monomial? Power gets larger. And you can watch it draw them too, so you can actually see what's happening. Okay, it keeps getting stretched up, taller and taller, faster and faster. Okay, it's like you see that kid in middle school, and then you see them like 8th, 9th grade, and then you see them as a sophomore, and they just keep getting taller and taller and taller and taller. We got a pretty infamous example of that in Game Club, one of our seniors as a freshman. I got pictures and video of him from Game Club events. Kid was like this big as a freshman. He actually got shoved in lockers. Like, he wanted to be shoved in lockers. He thought it was funny. And now the kid's like 6'1". He's huge. It just keeps getting stretched taller and taller because exponents have more power to them than multiplication. It's going to take off faster and faster and faster. Like, do you know your squares through 20, cubes through 10, fours through 5? I saw those eyes. Okay. You should know those. Think about the difference of 2 to the second, 2 to the third, 2 to the fourth. 2 squared. 2 to the third. 2 to the fourth. That's not that big of a change. But what's 5 squared? 5 cubed. 125. 5 to the fourth. 625. Just the difference from 2 to 5, how big those powers got, how fast they moved. What happens when I take 3 to the second versus 3 to the fourth? How fast does it move? What happens when I take 7 to the second versus 7 to the third? 7 to the second, 49. I know that one. What's 7 to the third? You should know your cubes through 10. I don't know. 343. Those things get huge fast. But the center of them is still going to look like this. Until I start doing translations, up, down, left, right, it's still going to be here. Can you still see that it's positive to negative infinity? Negative to positive infinity? Can you still see the x and y intercept is 0, 0? Can you still see the symmetry? Okay, can you still tell me the end behavior, the intervals of increase, decrease? You can do all of that stuff, and it's going to be one of these 4 options if it's a monomial. So, depends if you know what the graph looks like or not. 1/2 x to the fourth. Do you know your fourths? I've been saying that, especially those of you who were in here for Algebra 2. This is like 7 straight months of me telling you you need to know your squares through 20, cubes through 10, fourths through 5. Because I can use, just like perfect square steps, I can use fourth steps. 0 to the fourth is 0. 1 to the fourth is 1. So over 1 up, not 1, half. Because it's half x to the fourth. Over 2 up, what's 2 to the fourth? But? Okay, so over 2 up, 8. Over 3 up, what's 3 to the fourth? 81 times a half. 81 halves are 40.5. It's already off my graph. Mirror over your line of symmetry, and you see like a parabola, but it's a little thicker down at the bottom. Got some extra C's there. Okay, what about B? Okay, what is 1 to the 7th? But it's got a negative, so downtown. 2 to the 7th. At the very least, y'all have played that 2048 game. You should be able to do that. Okay, 2, double it. 4, double it. 8, double it. 16, 32, double it. 64, double it. 128. Okay, so I'm going to go over 2 and down 128. X to the 7th almost looks like a vertical line, except for that little kink in the middle. Okay, and it is going to be from positive infinity down to negative infinity because it has that negative out front. Yeah, those are the graphs. That's great. But tell me the stuff. Describe domain, range, x-intercept, y-intercept. End behavior, here, let's do continuity, increase, decrease, limit of my function as x approaches negative infinity, limit of my function as x approaches positive infinity. Okay, for part A, tell me the stuff. What's the domain? All real numbers. Range for part A for the quartic. Parenthesis or bracket. X and Y intercepts. Hits the origin. So I'm going to cheat and do this. Continuity. Are there any breaks in the continuity? Okay, so I will say it is continuous at all real numbers. So it's continuous for the entire domain. Where is it increasing? 0 to infinity, parentheses or brackets? Always parentheses. Remember, you're not increasing or decreasing at a location. That's why it has to have an interval. Decrease, negative infinity to 0. Remember, if you need to trace it from left to right, it's going down, then it's going up. Limit, as we go to both negative and positive infinity, infinity. Give you a homework hack here. If you had to do multiple of these, like say I now need to do part B, I would just do it like this. I'd say part A and then part B. Okay, how about that heptic? Yeah, heptic. Degree 7 monomial. What's the domain? Okay, same thing, negative infinity to infinity. Range. Same. X and Y intercepts. 0, 0 again. It is continuous for all real numbers again. Where is that one increasing? As I go left to right across the paper, where does my pencil go up? It's decreasing the whole time. So I'll say not applicable, negative infinity to infinity. And my limits, limit of, what was this, f of x again? F of x. As x goes all the way to negative infinity is up to positive infinity. Limit of my function as x approaches infinity is down to negative infinity. And then, after writing all that stuff, who's got a little bit of a cramp in their hand now? Okay. After writing all that stuff, what happens when I remind you that n is odd, n is even, a is positive, a is negative? That it's always going to do this stuff, right? What if I shorthanded and said, look at part A. Was part A positive or negative, odd or even? 1/2 x to the 4th. That's a positive even. I would just put next to that A. Because isn't that all the stuff that we just said? Ha ha. Look at part B. It's a negative x to the 7th. So A is negative, N is odd. Which of these is it? Look at all of the information at D. Isn't that all the stuff that we just wrote down? So down below that, I would like you to sketch the graph and then tell me A, B, C, or D, which of those will we have? You still need to be able to do this. I should be able to give you any function and you can tell me this stuff. Yeah? On a test, you better tell me stuff because I need to know that you know. Now, since it's open everything, could you come back to this and just copy? Absolutely. But for now, to save us some time, write A, B, C, or D. And you're going to see this with the sections throughout chapter 2, is we're going to start off by, hey, here's another kind of function we weren't talking about before. Do all the analysis. You don't got to prove anything, but you got to tell me stuff. So do you know what these look like? They take off very fast. If you need to change the scale so that you can fit more points on there, cool. Can you make the scale be logarithmic and go by powers? Is that what you're saying? Like y-axis is cubed?
I was just gonna make the scale go by.
Oh yeah,
And then just do X.
absolutely. That's a cheater way to get through the graph, especially the stretches and compressions. It's not a cheater way, it's a efficient way. It's using your resources. You can get way too excited over there about a pen. Tomorrow, assuming we're here, we will do more of 2-1. If you don't remember how to do basic quadratics, like don't square like a freshman, maybe get a little practice under your belt with those, because we're going to also do radical equations, where you got to square twice, maybe even 3 times to get to the answer. So, there wasn't anyone in here who was missing tests, right? Oh, the handful of you that got missing Chapter 0 packets still, get those in. Okay. Later this week when we do, hopefully, later this week when we do our next quiz, you should also be turning in your Chapter 1 packets.